Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for coming out tonight. And welcome to this event on Frome's action on climate and biodiversity. First of all, I just want to say a thank you to the Cheese and Grain for sponsoring the event. And also, as I think most of you know, there was a slight change of venue at the last minute. So thank you very much to them. I'm going to start with introductions. I'm Fiona Bowers. I'm an independent for Frome town councillor for Oakfield Ward, and I'm also the lead councillor for the Climate and Ecological Emergency Work Programme. I'm also on the board of Green and Healthy Frome and involved in various other projects in the town, particularly around community growing and food resilience. Nikki, if you want to.
And I'm Nikki Brain. I'm the resilience manager at Frome Town Council. So we work across a number of areas, which I'm going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah. We also want to apologise for the screen. It's not quite as large as we were hoping. So we hope that you'll be able to read the slides. But if not, please do come forward and we'll try and also make sure that we say what's on them. So I think the first question we're going to start with is why we're all here tonight. And there's a few different answers to that. The simplest answer is that at our annual town meeting back in April, a resident asked us to hold a meeting on Frome Town Council's strategy and plans to get to carbon neutral by 2030. And that is what sort of prompted the discussions about having an event tonight. Another short answer is, have you seen the news recently? It is terrifying. And incredibly scary with everything that's happening in Europe and America and around the world. So the real answer then is actually sort of an amalgamation of both of those things as to why we're here tonight, is that we might have sort of been asked about Frome Town Council's plans to get to carbon neutral by 2030. But the scale of the crisis or crises, because there's multiple, is such that it's not something that as a council we can do it alone. We need absolutely everyone to take action and to do what they can to tackle these crises. So it didn't really make sense to just focus on what we're doing as a town council when there is so many amazing organisations and individuals and people in Frome taking action every day, and we really wanted it to be about what everyone in Frome is doing. There's a quote that I come back to quite a lot in all of this. It's actually something that I read when I was thinking about becoming a town councillor, when Nick Dove had sent me a message on Instagram and said, have you thought about becoming a town councillor? And it's from Rob Hopkins, and it's, if we wait for government, it will be too little, too late. If we act as individuals, it will be too little. But if we act as communities, it might just be enough, just in time. And that's something that I come back to quite a lot in terms of, our way through this and how we can take genuine action to tackle the crises that we're facing. So that is what tonight is all about in a nutshell. It's about what all of us are doing in Frome, all of the parts that we're playing to tackle the crises, and how we can all work together more. What we as a town council can do to support individuals and organisations and community groups more, and how we can really sort of all work together more to accelerate action, and hopefully before it's too late. So the format for tonight is Nikki and I are just going to talk a little bit now about Frome Town Council sort of strategy to tackle the climate and ecological emergency. Then we've got a few other speakers who will introduce, and they're going to say a bit about what they're doing. Then we will have a 25-minute question and answer, but also we welcome comments, and if anyone wants to talk about a project that they're working on, then please do. And then it is over to you into the room. We've got stalls all around the outside of amazing organisations in Frome who are doing some really cool stuff. If you haven't heard of them or you'd like to get involved, then please go and have a chat. Or if you're working on something where things could be a bit more connected, then that would be great as well. So I'm going to pass over to Nikki now. Word of warning: this is the doom bit of the presentation. It will get more positive at some point.
It's only 2 slides and it's short, but really just to set the context of where we are right now. Obviously, Fiona's mentioned the things that we've been seeing in the news over the past weeks and months. And yes, it's shocking, but also no, it's not, in the sense that this is what kind of climate modelling and climate scientists have been predicting and telling us is going to happen if we continue on this trajectory. And so it's quite easy to think of it as a future problem, but it's really a here problem and a now problem. And that's why, as well as thinking about what we can do to, mitigate climate change and change for the better as fast as possible, it's also really thinking about how we adapt to the things that are already happening and are inevitably going to happen. It's also very easy to see it as a out there problem, things happening to other countries. Obviously, we can see what's happening in Canada at the moment, in Southern Europe, in China, and recently floods in Pakistan. But this is a map, which, apologies, you probably can't see in detail because of the size of the screen, but it shows the area of Somerset that is projected to be under that annual flood level by 2050 if we stay on a current trajectory. So it is on our doorstep. And that really, should just inform how we think about and respond to climate change. And that is it for the doom section, because we're going to move very, very swiftly on to what are we doing about it and what can we do about it.
Exactly. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Frome Town Council's overall strategy. So if you go on to the next one. So a bit of history. I'm with Independence for Frome, and since the beginning, tackling the climate crisis has been, a core priority for Independence for Frome. Back in, I asked Peter McFadden earlier, 2013, we hired the first resilience manager at a town council level in the UK. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, which is why I'm also got a strepsil, so apologies. Great timing. Town councillors declared a climate emergency in December 2018 and set a target for the town to become carbon neutral by 2030. We then held a series of climate panels in November 2019 with 150 residents on around 3 themes of energy, transport and resources, and then declared an ecological emergency in 2021. So the question now really is, what next? We have reviewed the strategy and the actions every year since it was created. And one of the things that we sort of noticed is that, first of all, the landscape in Frome, I think, has really changed in the last 4 years since it was created. There's a lot more organisations, a lot more people, a lot more, people doing amazing things in Frome. And that wasn't really sort of captured, obviously, at the time. And also a lot of the actions are either being done or in the process of, being done. So we're now at the stage of thinking, well, what's next? What's the next stage? What can we do? And where do we go from here? It is, I will say, still a priority for us. It's one of our 7 sort of main priorities as a town council. And we do have an incredible team at Frome Town Council working on it all the time. So if you go on to the next slide. So a bit of context in terms of what our role is. Helpfully, there is now only 2 councils in Somerset, which I think makes things a bit simpler. But as you can see from here, Somerset Council, and I should say that the lead councillor for climate and environment had agreed to come and speak tonight, but because of the by-election tomorrow, they weren't able to. So apologies from them. So Somerset Council, basically, they're the ones that are responsible for our highways, so for all our roads and all the decisions made about them, our car parks and parking, and our waste collections and recycling as well. And they are the planning authority, so they're the ones that make the actual decisions around developments and planning applications in Frome. In contrast, as Frome Town Council, our only statutory responsibility is to provide allotments, essentially, which I'm obviously very happy about. But we also have quite a bit of land, so we have parks and green spaces that we manage. We are a statutory consultee on planning applications, which means that Somerset County Council asks for our opinion, and we have a planning committee, which I'm a member of, and we decide to basically either support or object to planning applications. So we do have some sort of influence there. And then if you go on to the next one. But as you can see, this is a summary of Frome's carbon footprint. Frome Town Council is only responsible for 0.004% of Frome's carbon footprint. So where we are able to have a direct impact is really quite small. We have obviously done a lot in that area in terms of, solar panels on the roofs and insulation and looking at how we manage our parks and green spaces. But, it's quite a small area to have impact. So very quickly sort of realized, if we want to have impact in this area, we're going to have to sort of think about areas where we have influence indirectly or directly, but outside of what we are directly responsible for. So I think this is a really interesting diagram. All citizens and communities, and that means everyone in this room and everyone, has primary influence over 26% of the carbon emissions that we need to reduce. So that means that we are the people who can make the choice, and we can make those choices to reduce them. So that is quite empowering. And I think from Frome Town Council's perspective, that's where we see us able to have some impact, and we see our role there as really sort of supporting and enabling the community, doing what we can to make green choices easier, and doing project delivery through funding and partnership. For instance, Green Healthy Frome, which Nikki and then Sue will talk about a bit later. The other 74% is savings that industry and government have primary influence over, which could be depressing, but it could also be a way of, but what is really important there is that we do still have influence as citizens and as communities, and we can still have an impact in that area. It's just that it's a little bit less direct. So that is things such as, voting with citizens, it's voting with our wallets and campaigning and lobbying for change. And Frome Town Council, it is things like Nikki has worked with Somerset County Council and other town and parish councils on a retrofit project. Our sustainable planning guidance has been picked up by a number of other councils outside of Frome and used as a sort of a template for what it could look like. And we've also been working with Somerset County Council on making sure that local government pensions in Somerset are placed in green options. So the other way of looking at that is essentially behaviour change, which is 26%, and system change, which is 74%. And it's not as neat as that. Obviously, we need behaviour change can influence system change, and we need system change in order to make behaviour change possible and doable. But I think it's quite a nice way of looking at it and seeing that there is impact to be had in behaviour change, but also how much of it is system change. And that's what we really need. So over to Nikki to give you a bit more detail.
So I don't expect you to be able to read this, but just to set out that our starting point has been Frome's carbon emissions as a whole. And that's not to sort of try to count kilos of carbon, because that is possibly not the best use of everyone's time. It's really just to get an understanding of where the main impacts are and what we can achieve. So this shows, for example, that mains gas in housing is the single biggest source of emissions in Frome at the moment, which is why we focus quite a lot of our time on working on home energy efficiency retrofit, which obviously has the benefit of saving people money as well as saving carbon. So I'll come on to our project on that in a little bit. But also, it's easy, especially in a crisis, to get very narrowly focused on carbon. And this is about people, ultimately. And, there are fundamental things that people need to be able to even engage in this conversation in the first place. So I always like to come back to the donut, which was created by an economist called Kate Raworth. And I'm just going to quote her here to explain what this is, because you probably can't read it. So she says, humanity's 21st century challenge is to meet the needs of all within the means of the planet. In other words, to ensure that no one falls short on life's essentials, from food and housing to healthcare and political voice, while ensuring that collectively we do not overshoot our pressure on Earth's life-supporting systems on which we fundamentally depend, such as stable climate, fertile soils, and a protective ozone layer. Between social and planetary boundaries lies an environmentally safe and socially just space in which humanity can thrive. So we try to keep that in mind when we're looking at how we decarbonise. It's about working on projects that work for people in Frome. And where this becomes quite clear is in a project that Sue and Charlotte are going to talk about shortly, which is Green and Healthy Frome, which is a partnership between Adventure, Frome Town Council and Frome Medical Practice, which looks at the links between climate and health and how we can do things that benefit our health alongside the climate. I'm not going to talk too much more about that as we have a presentation on it shortly from our partners, but I will talk about one project that Frome Town Council runs as part of that programme, because it sort of highlights this, I suppose, which is Healthy Homes. So we've partnered with the Centre for Sustainable Energy, who are an independent energy advice charity who operate across the Southwest. And we've been working with them for the last 2 years to provide energy advice sessions here in Frome, to train up volunteers to be able to do home visits, to help people with basic things like draft proofing and see if they're eligible for any kind of grant support. And through various comms and other activities. So 255 people received in-person advice over the first 2 years of the project. And we had a 4-fold increase in people receiving help from the CSE over that period, from when the project began. We partnered with Frome Medical Practice because they have a lot of patients who their health is going to be more affected, they're more vulnerable through existing health conditions to living in a cold and damp home. So we've been able to partner with them to send messages directly to those patients to let them know about the support that's available. And also Charlotte has done in-house training with GPs and other practitioners to make them aware of that support that's available. We've trained up 5 energy volunteers and we're hoping to train up more in the next 3 years. So as we'll come on to, we've extended the Green and Healthy Frome programme with funding for another 3 years. So we're hoping to scale that up. And we've also hired a retrofit assessor to support whole house retrofit. So that will be supporting people with plans on how to retrofit their homes. And that's something we'll be able to offer for free. So over the first 2 years, we saved Frome residents over £150,000, and that's from access to grant funding and also actual cost savings from reducing energy in the home. And we also save 50 tonnes of carbon. So it's really demonstrating that those things can and should sit together. Another area that we focus on as a town council is active travel. And that's really recognising again that it's something that has a huge public health benefit alongside benefiting the planet. So a couple of years ago, we did a survey called Walk Ride Frome, where we were asking people to highlight the areas in Frome that we thought needed to be improved for walking and cycling. We had, I think, over 500 people respond to that and 63 areas that came up for improvement. As Fiona said, we're not the Highways Authority. We can't directly influence that. But what we've done is lead on a walking and cycling infrastructure plan in consultation with a group of, well, using the evidence from that consultation and also with a working group of Frome residents, which has been adopted by Somerset Council. So our job now really is to take that plan and push for that to be delivered, because it's sitting on the website, but it doesn't mean that it's going to happen unless we push for it. And the other large project that we're working on at the moment relating to active travel is a trial of Somerset's first Safer School Street scheme, which is encompassing Trinity School, Critchell School, Oakfield and Avanti. And that trial is going to start in spring 2024. It's something we've been working on for the last 2 years in consultation with residents and parents and schools in that area. The aim is really to improve safety, increase the ability to travel to school actively, also looking at air quality and reducing traffic volume and speed in that area. Anyone who lives there or drops off to schools there will know sort of the challenges that that area faces in the mornings. We've been working with active travel charity Sustrans on that scheme, and they manage the National Cycle Network. So they've been able to bring in some extra funding to build what's called a quiet way along Somerset and Oakfield roads. And that is really to, again, calm traffic and make it safer for cycling. So that work's going to start before the end of the year in terms of the infrastructure work. Another area that we look at as a town council is waste, and one of the projects that we work on is plastic-free communities. So we've had over 25 businesses in Frome so far sign up to the Plastic-Free Communities Pledge, and we work with businesses every year. We need to meet a target of new businesses coming on board in order to keep Frome's award as a plastic-free town. And just touching on biodiversity as well, obviously we declared an ecological emergency back in 2021. And the first step that we decided to take was actually to understand what is here already. So we started a community wildlife mapping project, which thousands of people have been involved in across Frome. It uses an app, and people have gone out to log the species and identify things that they found. We've had over 2,000 logs so far from people, and so it's a nice bit of kind of citizen science, but also gives us a baseline to see how we're doing on biodiversity, and it will help to inform how we manage our green spaces that we look after, but also sort of help engage on wildlife friendly gardening and other things across the town. So we've got some of our environment team here sat at the back. So I hope I can do justice to what they do. So obviously you'll see our rangers around town. We do manage how many parks and green spaces? 10, 12, more, 14 across town. And Rob has said to me before, it's really about balancing access for people and enjoyment of those spaces with nature. So that's why we've done things like reducing mowing in some places. We've had a glyphosate ban in Frome since 2016. And the team has plans to plant 27,000 trees in the next few years, and that's one for every Frome resident. We've also already got projects like the tiny forest at Egford Park, which I think was one of 2 in the UK so far. And there was just a decision made at council last week to build a community woodland down at Spring Gardens with 27,000 trees planted there. And the team are currently refreshing the management plans for the spaces that we look after as well. Another team that we work closely with in the town council is the planning committee. As Fiona said, we're a statutory consultee on planning decisions. So 2021, again, we adopted some climate emergency planning guidance, which is what the planning committee uses to engage developers and kind of push for more sustainable development and say the kind of things that we'd like to see through that process. And finally, our comms team does brilliant work on things like Great Big Green Week, although to be honest, we don't do a whole lot other than put the programme together, because we put out a shout out to the community, and everyone in this room and others came back with a bunch of amazing events. So we had over 60 events this year, and that's a really good way of bringing everyone together to highlight all the great things that are being done. And as we touched on at the start, at the moment, for the last 4 years, our strategy has focused very much on mitigation and how we reduce our carbon footprint. Obviously, adaptation and how we sort of adapt to what's coming and what's already here is also incredibly important. So we're planning to hold a workshop specifically on adaptation in September. So we will send you details on that. We don't have a date yet, but yeah, you'll receive details if you signed up for this event. So keep an eye out for that. And so, with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sue Palmer from Adventure, who is the project manager for the Green and Healthy Frome programme, and Charlotte Carson from Frome Medical Practice, who is the sustainability lead and is leading on the project from the medical practices side.
Shall I start off with the clicker? Hello, my name's Sue Palmer. I'm the project manager and the Future Shed lead for Green and Healthy Frome. Many of you will have had contact with the project already. It's now in the start of its 3rd year. So we went for 2 years of development and evidencing around the work that we were focusing on, that is focused on the join between health and climate. And recently, hopefully you will have been aware that we won a further 3 years of funding to continue and build on the work that we've already done. So we're just going to spend 10 minutes just taking you through what we're doing. And I think this is very much about how we as Frome are beginning or trying to or doing what we can to look at climate and where we can both save carbon emissions and increase our health at the same time. So we are 3 partners. We are Adventure Frome, which is supporting social enterprise, and Frome Town Council, and the Frome medical practice. And that's a really crucial partnership. And we specifically focus on making the join between the health of ourselves and the health of our planet, because by addressing one, we automatically have impact on the other. And health, also our own health, is a way into the climate conversation, which is super complex, as we well know. We work very closely together. And I'm just going to say that Frome, I think, is fortunate in many ways, but three things stand out that enable our project to happen. The lottery investing in Frome with the Green and Healthy Frome project to scale up our work also includes our project being a model or an inspiration to other towns of our size in the UK. The work that has gone before our project has been created by many years of residents starting their own projects here and persisting on keeping climate on the agenda. And that's been really important that we've built off that work. And also we have, as many of you know, an extraordinary network of community groups and organisations that are able to take action and join up together. And I think this is really crucial. So I'm just going to skip through these four things that you can see here, but you probably can't read. Apologies for that. We do have printouts of this presentation on the table over there. So also make contact with either me or Charlotte if you want a copy of this. So climate, I think we've talked about that already. Fiona's articulated this thing about we have a capacity perhaps to take action on 26% of emissions. These numbers and scales and capacities are at one level a mystery to all of us, exactly what that means. But it also gives us an area, a boundary. There's a lot out of our control, but there's also a lot in our control, and we can some of that is really in our power to act on. And I think I've noticed over the last 2 years, certainly for myself and the people I work with, anything that brings us together with other people, as Jenny Shackelford referred to, like mending together, makes us feel part of something larger and gives us capacity and puts our power onto that table. We can feel that, we experience it. It makes us feel positive in all kinds of ways and addresses our community cohesion as well. In terms of health, I'm going to leave Charlotte to talk about that specifically in terms of Frome medical practices work. A strong community. Really, our project is really about focusing on behaviour change. How can we have an influence across our town, our whole town, 30,000 people and the surrounding neighbourhoods? What is the tipping point that we might need to, where we move into something, say, which is now being referred to, I'm hearing through various networks, of the climate majority? How do we begin to put our voice to advocate for the things that we know are important to do right at the centre stage and let that tip over and become that behaviour change where we can act and take responsibility? And also systemic. This is really important. The long view of climate affects our short-term planning, and so it should. And I think sometimes it's easy to get quite tipped over, or I remember when we were doing our grant application, there was a lot of focus on the cost of living. And of course, it's all wrapped up together. Everything is connected. That is what climate teaches us. Everything is connected. If we keep our eye on the long view, that will affect our short-term planning. And actually, that's very helpful for us. So also, while it's important to focus on Frome, I always feel that we have to keep our attention on the whole planet. Our atmosphere is shared. It's only about 5 to 9 miles deep. And I think when we really have that in our minds, that blanket that surrounds the planet, it's quite extraordinary. We share that earth, we share the atmosphere, and we are connected to the global south historically through racial injustice, through social injustice. So also climate is that context where we can lift up our eyes and say, actually, we are connected. How can we connect elsewhere to people in the planet? So I'm just going to skip through the next bit. So basically, I'm here, and you won't be able to read any of this. I'm so sorry, you just can't read any of it. But basically, this details the amount of projected tons of carbon equivalent we want to save through our programme. Do go over to our table and take a printout or ask us for one. But these are quite detailed areas of saving. And this is where we've got very much a focus in terms of our project on some things are specific to around carbon emission saving and measuring, and some things about behavior change, and some things about right where they cross over. Storytelling is absolutely key to this. Oh, sorry. So one partnership, 3 organizations, a community of 30,000. These are our projects that we work across: Storytelling Beyond Frome, Healthy Homes, Green Community Connectors, Choosing Wisely, Cycle Together, and Future Shed. And I'm just going to skip really fast through these. So this is kind of storytelling. This is very much about the behavior change that we can influence within Frome, but also beyond Frome as well. And some of you hopefully will recognize the Frome Times wraparound, which we consider to be one of our most successful, interesting projects that we did, which was before my time, where a Frome wraparound was designed for the Frome Times, visioning Frome into 2030. Who doesn't want the tram down the centre of the high street? Future Shed, many of you here have been connected with Future Shed. This is hosted at Adventure, is part of Adventure, and this is the place that's really community-led. It's really focused on how we can take action through these kind of networks of action that we've created, with about 300 people a part of, in some shape or form, around food, textile reuse, well-being, and others are in the pipeline. And Future Shed has been a real motivator in terms of creating projects that are coming up. You'll see a lot happening in the autumn that's focused around how we as a community are taking action. Charlotte.
Thanks. Hello, I'm just going to correct Nikki on my role is community sustainability lead. And I've been joined the last couple of weeks by a new role at the practice, who's sustainability evaluation lead. So those are really unique roles that have been enabled by this funding, don't exist anywhere else in the country. It's very new. And yeah, we now have a sustainability team at the medical practice. So it's quite unique, and it's all been possible through the partnership funding. So that's a good start. Nikki has covered Healthy Homes a little bit, but I just wanted to reiterate the reason that the medical practice is partnered with the council on this is because we've seen in the news, and we see at the practice the impact that this has on our health. We've seen damp and cold homes have a huge impact on young children, and through our whole lives, they can have a huge impact. So this is why the medical practice is part of this project. We've been feeding into what it looks like, but also using opportunities where we can see it to spread the message that there is support out there. And I suppose it's a cost saving as well. Sorry, I hate doing this talking thing, but anyway, bear with me. Cycle Together, we also supported with at the beginning of the project. So Emma's at the back, she's leading on this part of the project. But we all know active travel, keeping ourselves healthy and well, is also feeding into reducing our carbon footprint. It also makes us feel better, it's connecting us to our community, and it's keeping us healthier as well. So we've been promoting that at the practice, and we're also going to be doing what we can in terms of the staff active travel. There's a lot to work on there as well. Yes, there's the community project at the back. So leading into the projects that we focus on at the practice, we have Choosing Wisely. This is based at the practice. We work on this ourselves. And this project focuses on reducing medication where it's appropriate. It looks at optimizing our testing, looking at patient pathways, how we can reduce our carbon footprint, but also how we can make the patient experience easier to go through. So it's a huge challenge at the moment, and probably will continue to be a huge challenge. But again, this is slightly out of our control. But in Frome, we are working across all teams to try and reduce that carbon footprint. So here is a tiny little image. There are some blue dots on this little diagram here. And the largest blue dot is medicines and chemicals in primary care. So that's the pharmaceuticals, that's our medication up at the GP practice. Now, this is the same across the whole country. It's not just in Frome. But this is where we're working. We're focusing on reducing that dot. It's not just about reducing it down, but it's what we can put in that place. So there's lots in Frome. everyone's here in this room, but there's lots in Frome that can be offered instead of that medication. So that's where we're working towards, not only reducing testing and medications, so that has its carbon impact, and inhalers are a big part of that, but it's how can we support people's health and well-being, reaching out to the community outside of the practice doors as well, enabling that. So we have plans coming up that you can't see that are on the slides over there. This is mainly, it's ramping up what we've been doing in the practice. So we've got a new evaluation role. We've got the medicines management team are on board, and they're going out into pharmacies. So we're really reaching out into the community, seeing where we can engage that conversation in a wider context, not just within our doors. And part of the work that we're doing really is, I think it's through the first 2 years of the project, we've been able to gather information and demonstrate to other practices and to the primary care network level, the integrated care board level, and demonstrate the benefits of finding alternative ways of looking after our health. So we know that our health is not necessarily just to do with our proximity to a GP practice or how many times we visit the GP, but it's really about the building blocks of our lives. So there's so much there that contributes to our well-being, and it's supporting that through the practice, through this trusted messenger. So we've got all these wonderful things out in the community, but how do people know about them? How do we close the gap between those that want or need that context and what's available? And that's where Green Community Connectors comes in. It's enabling people to have that light touch first conversation about climate and health that maybe they didn't have before. It's involving people in all of the options that are out in the town and in Frome. And it's also feeling part of the movement. So Fiona talked about the 26%, and it's how can we feed into that tipping point? How can we start a domino effect in Frome so that we are all working towards a well-being economy rather than a financially focused economy? So we have other plans coming up, which you can't see here, but we're ramping up the work that we're doing at the medical practice with Green Community Connectors and staff linking into the hospital that's next door, which is actually separate from where we work. But conversations are starting on how we can work together across that site, which is also quite unusual in terms of secondary care and primary care communicating. We're trying to encourage that and learn a lot from that. And then plastic-free periods was just an idea in the first 2 years and has become part of the project, has its own funding in this funding stream. And this is a great way to reach into young people in Frome. That was worded really badly. This is a great opportunity to bring a younger audience in Frome, and also have that conversation from a young age when maybe conversations are challenging and there's not much information anyway. So this is a way to feed into how we can do this as a community, because there's a lot of us in this room that are within a certain age range. So how can we bring that in? I think that's it. It's mainly, I suppose, what we're driving towards is how we can really use this trusted messenger in the health system to communicate this message as well, taking advantage of that. So we're asking people in this room and in the town to come to us because the doors are open, and this is an opportunity that we have for 3 years to demonstrate something different, something inspiring, and creating a cultural shift towards a well-being economy.
Great. Yeah, just great. Just to finish off with, obviously our project also has an evaluation strand. So we have an in-house evaluator, Owen King, who's inside Frome Town Council, who's really looking at the evidence of our project, what we're gaining, and we're also creating a social impact report. I think finally, to wrap up, is just this thing about how please come to us and let us know how you'd like to see action taken and how you'd like to get involved. And also just to say that the reminder of this thing about we're also providing hopefully inspiration for other towns and other communities. So just to kind of reference, to finish off with that global connectivity, yesterday I was on a call with the Eastbourne Climate Coalition over on the Sussex coast, and he'd heard about flat pack democracy, Frome's movement. So, and then he'd kind of connected with this woman called Ellie in Minnesota, in the US, who knew also about Green and Healthy Frome, and Minnesota connected us together. And I think that tells me a lot about the capacity that we have to really connect around the world and to, you know, take action together. Over to the next people. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to pass on to Amanda now, who works with Frome College.
Hi, good evening. I feel like I've been waiting for 25 years for this moment. I graduated in the last century with an ecology and conservation degree and have been teaching for 25 years, and I love it. So I am Amanda. I work at Frome College, and never to be wasting time, last week I decided to go and see our principal. And I asked her if I could develop a sustainability agenda for Frome College. And happily, right there on the spot, she said, no problem. I'm going to give you 1 day to drive a Frome College-based green and healthy programme. And we've decided to call that an Earth House initiative. But I need help, okay? I can't and I shouldn't do this alone. Please, can you support us? We have a myriad of plans, including DT projects, which adopt a circular economy theme, a flower garden, the development of a green cafe, green careers fair, which we plan and we will hold in March, a programme of guest speakers, they're coming, okay? And we really, really want to increase the biodiversity of what I think is a very great treasure for the Frome community, our campus. So the list is extensive, and we want to be ambitious, not just for ourselves, but the students that we represent and hopefully the way that they represent themselves. I fundamentally believe it's essential that our teenagers hold the sustainability baton in our community. We must encourage their ideas and hopes for a greener, healthier future. So to that end, if you have time to volunteer, if you have expertise to offer, if you have resources that you can lend or give, if you can support us in any way, we will be incredibly grateful, and anything that you do will be wholeheartedly embraced for us. Thank you.
And finally, we have Maddie from 2050.
Hello. If I'd known there'd be so many people here, I would have been better prepared. Okay. Local business, global influence. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the company that I work with in Frome. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about 2050, that I would tell you a bit about the sort of the human dimension of climate, I guess. And then what we would say to a big company about their climate plan. So that's a bit of free consultancy for you, basically. And then a little bit about our community connections. So I'm going to whiz through this a little bit. So many of you might know, how many of you already know 2050? Any out there? Quite a, no, actually not many. Okay. So it's basically what I'd call a human rights and corporate responsibility consultancy. And it's a pretty impressive client list. We've built up this list, I guess, over the last 20 years, but mostly in the last couple of years. I joined 2050 in 2011, and there was 3 people, and there's now 50 in lots of offices around the world. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of how this whole agenda has been sort of really ramping up. And I would say that the regulatory landscape has been absolutely exploding both within the environmental and the legal space, which is good news, I think. We have like fancy pictures like this that we use with clients to show them like what the impact is between the connections between climate and human rights, being a human rights consultancy. So we're all trying to infiltrate companies and say, oh, but you also need to think about climate and the environment, which generally they do, but in a very siloed way. So quick poll. I always like to do something a little bit interactive. Can business be a force of good? If you think, yes, really it is up here. If you think, really, no, it's not, you can get on the floor. Come on, what do we think? We got a few on the floor. Okay, interesting. Sort of mixed. Okay, interesting. Well, overall, from my perspective, it has to be, right? 2050 is named 2050 because the decisions that business make today is going to shape the world in 2050. That's not to say that all the efforts that we make at a community level, of course, count. But for us, that's what we believe is we're sort of trying to turn the oil tankers around. And those of you who know and love the work of Joanna Macy know that she talks about holding actions. And I feel like that's very much the sort of space that I work in, is it's kind of, sometimes they say it's about making bad companies less bad. I don't mean it quite like that, because actually I do genuinely believe that the people that we work with do, it's about sort of changing hearts and minds, I suppose. So what we would say to big corporates, I'll put them under these three buckets. I won't go through the whole thing, but something about reviewing your policies, plans and targets through consultation with others. So it's very much about rights holder engagement and stakeholder engagement, a little bit like we did to build the Frome plan. But it's also about, you might have a great idea, it might be a great idea for you, but have you thought about how that might affect somebody that has got less or different abilities or a different risk profile or a different background from you? Right, so these are sort of really important things to take into consideration, and the only way you're going to really know is to ask. Really get to know your supply chains is the next one. So we do a lot of mapping around supply chains. We have local researchers and social researchers in different countries that will go out and talk to growers, will talk to their workers about what are your working conditions on the ground? How is it for your communities? That's the sort of work that we do. And finally, good practice management and management systems. So there's something about implementing really good management systems. And I would say probably 80% of the regulation which is coming out of the EU now is to do with corporate due diligence. And it's all about having a really good management system in place, you know, really looking at what are the issues, how do we prioritize, how do we take action, how do we report on those things, and how do we track those things, like kind of going round and round that circle. And, you know, I guess for us, I really like to sort of come under the radar of talking to these companies about role modeling good behavior, which they generally never employ us for, but I like to have that conversation with them. We reference around the inner development goals. So how many of you have heard of the inner development goals? A few. Okay, so we have the sustainable development goals, but then there are also the inner development goals. So the guy, well, I guess the easiest way for me to kind of remember it is that somebody said, I thought climate was like the biggest issue of our time. Actually, now I know it's apathy and greed and, okay, you sort of get the idea. Yeah. So what are the qualities that leaders, we all need to be able to be leaders in this space? And finally, just to say that 2050 also gets involved in a number of different ways, both with individuals in the community. I just mentioned Sustainable Frome myself, so I also see Alex here, who's also director of Sustainable Frome. And we very much welcome both individuals, but also groups of individuals or organizations. And if there's any way that we can support, for example, through giving you a website or a bank account or giving you public liability insurance to run an event, then we also incubate that sort of thing. So we very much love to hear from you from that perspective. Okay, thank you.
So that's it for speakers. We just wanted to give a bit of a flavour of sort of some of the amazing things that are happening in Frome. So I'm going to pass over to Steve, who's going to facilitate a Q&A.
Take this off here. Excellent. Thanks, Fiona. Good evening, everybody. My name's Steve Tanner. I'm also a councillor. We're running a bit late, so I'm not going to go on for too long. We've got about 15 or 20, 25 minutes to take a few questions from the floor. But also, if you run a project or you've got a project which you want other people to know about, please let us know about that as well. There'll be an opportunity afterwards, as Fiona said, where you can have a look at all the stalls around, and we'll go to that first. We've got a couple of people with microphones running around, which is Rachel and Joe, I believe. So, right, without further ado, let's go to the first question. First question, anybody to any of the panel up here? Paul, down in the middle there.
Shall I start?
He was first.
Okay.
I'm not going to fight. There's no, we're all one.
Sorry, I
team.
didn't see your hand go up, sir.
We're all one team here. Climate Film Festival. So James Godman, and we've got various people like Julia and others who are, we've second year of running the festival, 45 films, 6 countries, and we're certainly now starting to get a bit more global traction. But I think the main message and the reason why we're doing it is about making it visual, the change and the need to change visual. And Frome, we've got the Loop banner up now at the bottom of Babcock's. Apart from that, I see nothing visible around the town. Council, not locally, I'm not going to, it isn't just Frome. It's London, it's every town and city I go to across the UK. The banners, the information, the visibility for people when they're driving. So we're certainly going to get more active and get some signs up out and about. So hopefully we'll do it in the right way so we don't cause confusion and concern. But I think visibility is a key, way to actually help that conversation and dialogue, which I can't see today.
Great, thanks very much for that. I would say there is a board at the back where if you've got any ideas or any comments, and then there should be some post-it notes on tables as well. Please put the comments and ideas on the mapping board at the back, and we will, as a council, we'll take those and if we can action them, we will, obviously. Paul, down the front here.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. My question is, I think it's, am I right in saying it's 5 years since Frome Town Council set a target of carbon neutral by 2030? Is that right, Nikki?
Yeah, I think so. It was before my time, but yes.
Okay, so it's 5 years. I still haven't got any sense in those 5 years what percentage of carbon emissions have we actually reduced. So we're kind of like a third of the way through the target period. What percentage have we actually reduced in that time?
So I think when I looked back at the figure from the original strategy and looked at the figure for now, which was through the impact tool, it looked like we're sort of on track with what had been projected. But to be honest, a lot of that is down to obviously things like decarbonisation of the grid, like things that have happened at a sort of systemic level. And it's really, even though we know that emissions have reduced, it's really hard to attribute it to specific activities unless we're measuring those things. So there are, obviously, we've got an evaluation project as part of Green and Healthy Frome where we can sort of understand in fairly high levels of detail what specific activities are saving X amount of carbon. That's much harder to do for everything else that's sort of happening out in the community and also stuff that's happening at a kind of higher level. The only thing that we've really got to look at is things like the impact carbon tool, which is what we use. And if we refer back to it year on year and see if it's going down or not. So it's not something that it's very, very difficult to kind of collect everything that's happening collectively with what everybody's doing and say, well, that's added up to X. But what we can see is sort of the national data and the trends to see sort of how that's reducing over time. And like, we know that everything that's happening here is impacting that. So yeah, it's complicated and we're trying to better understand how we can sort of capture everything that's happening and how we can translate that into, we as a town have saved X amount, as well as not just it's gone down, but we can't quite say what has contributed to that, if that makes sense.
Can I just add in, just to say, because Nikki mentioned Owen, who's the evaluator for Green Healthy Frome, he's working full-time now, I think, or 4 days a week, and that's on sort of 8 projects, and just evaluating the impact of that is a full-time job. So as Nikki said, there is, and also, you know, we've had conversations about how much energy and time and resources do we put into trying to measure and evaluate versus, you know, actually doing the actions that we know will have an impact. So it's really difficult, but I think it's one of the things that we could also, you know, part of beginning to do a bit of a mapping exercise of all the actions going on in Frome is to begin to look at what could the collective impact of our actions be. Whether we'll be able to work that out to much detail is probably not. It's probably not going to be possible, but it would, we can begin to look at it, I think.
Okay, so
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
So, there's one there, and then I'll go with Nick down here. Oh, 3.
Could I just say something quickly as well?
okay,
Sorry. Oh,
Hang on.
can I just respond quickly? Because carbon, like what we've been talking about in this is like carbon reduction is, and I know you're talking about the net zero targets, but what we're trying to focus on along with carbon reduction are some quite intangible measurements. So that's what we're looking at as green and healthy as well, is the benefits to our health and well-being, our connection as a community. And Frome has a good history in demonstrating that and showing that and sharing that.
There was a question down here somewhere.
I don't know how relevant this is. It's just that when I look at central government and how they are not treating it like an emergency, what I would expect if they were is that they would be like, for example, how they did with COVID. Everybody knew what COVID was. Everybody got instructions about it. There was no way, even if you weren't watching TV, you would have found out one way or another. And nothing like that is happening on, you know, central government scale. And I don't know whether there's any way that, you know, at this kind of political level, there could be something closer to that. Because, for example, in France, I think with the recent energy crisis, I think they basically asked the population to use less energy, and they had a massive drop in their energy use just by saying to everyone, we're in this together, we need your help, and making it so everybody knew that. Don't know how relevant that is, but that's what I'd love to do.
Good point. I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to come back on that at all.
I agree. I think it's a really good idea. I think we've got the storytelling role at Green Healthy Frome, and I think that's sort of been is now significantly bigger than it was in the first 2 years, and I think that's one of the sort of objectives to look at. But no, I agree. I really agree with you. I think there's a lot around the communication side of it.
Great, thank you. There's a gentleman here, then gentleman there, and then lady at the back.
Hi, Kieran from Gardening Together. I'm not sure now whether my question is not wide enough, but I was going to ask, what does carbon neutral kind of look like now for us, which is obviously more involved, but what does it look like? If we hit the target, what will the town and we all be feeling?
That's a
for Nikki.
That's a big question, but I'll try to answer it. As I said, well, firstly, there's 2 different ways of looking at carbon emissions. One is territorial, so that's emissions that are actually produced in Frome. And one is consumption emissions, so that's the emissions of everything we buy, regardless of where it's been manufactured and made, which is much harder to track and control. So there's 2 different ways you could answer that, really. If we're looking purely at emissions that are created within Frome, then that would mean almost completely decarbonising the energy that we use in our homes through electricity, through reducing use of gas, whether that's moving over to air source heat pumps, but fundamentally it's about insulation. Insulation is the best thing that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint in your home. It saves you money, it keeps you warm, it's not investing in expensive technology, it is, you know, the fundamental thing, and that's why we're really trying to focus on helping people to do that. So that would be number 1, and we have lots of old buildings, sort of historic buildings in Frome that are hard to heat. So that's where's Sally? Hi, Sally. Sally is our new retrofit assessor at Frome Town Council, and she is going to be helping people create plans free of charge to kind of look at their buildings, especially sort of hard to treat buildings. Another big area is transport. Obviously, people are going to have to continue to use cars for the foreseeable future, especially in a kind of context of Frome where we don't have the public transport infrastructure, even though we've got amazing groups campaigning to improve that. So I'd say probably the biggest potential for Frome is the fact that we're a small town. A lot of our journeys can be walked and cycled if you are physically able, if you've got the time. But actually, we've got a fundamental problem at the moment, which is, you know, even if you're in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, if you're pushing a pram, then it's almost impossible to get places because you've got cars parked over drop curbs, you've got a complete lack of drop curbs in some places, you've got no crossings. So I think in terms of shifting, the best thing that we can do is make it easier, attractive, convenient for people to make those short journeys, which can be walked and cycled, and campaign really hard for better public transport because people are still going to need to go further. Obviously, we still need to use cars. We've got co-wheels cars. We've got 2 in Frome at the moment. It would be amazing if we had one on every street because that would dramatically reduce the amount of private vehicles that people need. So there's not an easy solution, but that would be another thing. Does anyone else want to come in on other areas?
Should we move on?
I mean, there's more, obviously, in terms of food, in terms of, you know, what we're growing, what we're eating, what we're using. Circular economy is massive. So yeah, when looking at sort of that consumption side of things, what can we reuse? What can we keep within Frome that's of value to us? And obviously Keep It Frome is a new campaign that we're here trying to sort of draw that message home. And as James said, it's, you know, trying to increase visibility of that around town. That would be number 3, I think.
Great.
Just add something.
Sure.
So I guess people have been thinking about this for a little while, and the transition town movement is probably one of them where there's a lot of resources around this. And I don't know, I guess Sustainable Frome's been going for quite a long time now in Frome, and the objects are very wide. So I think it's we can kind of get caught up a little bit again into the sort of the net zero or the carbon neutral agenda. But if you look at what the transition town is doing now, when it started, it was very much about peak oil, and it was about what our communities look like post peak oil. And now they're very much looking more at transition streets and how you get on with your neighbours. You know, so there's been a big shift around that. And I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't be counting the carbon, but I think we do need to be thinking a bit more widely as well.
I think what I would just add on that is that maybe actually what you know, being carbon neutral looks like is very positive. Is, you know, green healthy Frome is it's healthy lifestyles, it's being together as a community, it's living and working locally, feeling part of something really positive, eating food that is grown locally and using what you're buying, you know, to think. But it's a shift, I think, away. I don't know how far to go on this, but to say this, but I think a lot of what everyone is very scared of giving up of, I think often it's framed in sort of what we're going to have to give up and what we're going to have to sacrifice. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of what we're actually going to gain by it.
Thank you. I've got Mick here, then I've got a lady at the back there, and a lady over there. So, Mick.
Yeah, thanks. I had a thought. I've been door knocking, not this time round, but previous times as a councillor, and I visited a house which was a social rented house, and I noticed it was probably built in the 60s and it still had single glazing. And what I wondered is if could we have some engagement somehow, I think Fair Housing for Frome are looking at it, but to engage with all the social housing providers in Frome and get a report from them on the condition of their houses, how many need to be upgraded and what their plans are for doing that. Because I was shocked to see that, to be fair, and the people who lived there weren't entirely happy about it, but they knew they were lucky to have a social house. And I think we're starting with retrofit. We need to start at that level to make sure those people can afford their bills.
I'll take that, Mick. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We'll action that. as the planning team at the, I'm chair of the planning team at the Friend Council, as you know. Thanks for the question. Yeah, we'll get on with that. We'll get in contact with them and see if we can get some numbers from them. Thanks very much. Just set myself up there, haven't I? Lady at the back in the orange had her hand up, I saw, I think. Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. Hi, I just wanted to talk about a project that we're going to launch in September. I work with neighbourhood networks, and it's clear to me that we need to all work together. And neighbourhood networks is launching transition streets that Maddie just referred to, and it's a way that people can work with their neighbours. They're given a resource. They're given 5 or 6 topics like energy, transport, food. Everybody works together, it builds community, it lowers carbon, and it's a win-win. So I just wanted to say that that's going to happen in September, and we really welcome people to go out there and talk about that as we launch it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's a lady over there, I think, Rachel, yeah.
Hi, I'm Lucia from Whole Foods, and just so we have been supporting the community with offering window spaces for anybody advertising their projects to do with anything. We have posters up in the window, also have great knowledge of good, healthy food to eat and natural medicines. So please come and support us at Frome Whole Foods. Also, trees are one of the best carbon reducers, so we need to plant loads and loads of trees, which I know that the town council are doing. And also, just to back up what Nick just said there, I think getting education out to a lot of the social housing residents about how to reduce their rubbish and how to care more for the environment would go an awful long way to stopping it from just being a middle class issue.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed for that. It's probably a good time. Yeah. There was a question that I think the panel and I think we was trying to put up there, but it was a bit small, but we were going to throw out to everybody, which was, I need to read it. How can we support each other more effectively to accelerate climate change in Frome? And I'd say, just use the post-it notes, and when we have the mingle, we can talk.
So accelerate climate change.
Accelerate climate action in Frome. I think we're accelerating it quite enough, actually. Moving on. Nick, if he stitches me up as well.
Thanks, Steve. First of all, can I say what a great panel that there is today? It's normally at these meetings, it's always men my age up there, so it's great to see 6 women speaking really well about what's happening.
Thank you.
And we're all ladies.
Apart from you, Steve, of course. One of the things that I love about Frome is a sense of community, how people work really well together, look after each other, look after communities, the strength of our neighbourhood networks that have been built recently. And I also think about the things that have caused significant change in how people behave. And it always sounds quite petty, but if you remember the introduction of a 5p surcharge for plastic bags in supermarkets, and almost overnight there was a reduction of 90% of usage. I was thinking, could we look at something similar to that? If we could look at a town like Frome and find ways of incentivizing communities to reduce their carbon footprint. One of my relatives lives in France, and they have a system over there in some of their regions where you get a card that shows how often you've used the health service effectively. Now, if we could have something where every person in Frome had some kind of card that showed how much carbon they used, and there was a way to somehow incentivize or reward that. And there are things like the car club. You know, if you could get a community or one of the networks to say, yeah, we'll agree, we'll all use one of the cars, the co-rails cars, thanks. Waste collection. Sitting next to me is Ben, who's part of the Loop composting situation. Every household in Frome has a brown recycling food waste thing that is picked up by Somerset Waste Partnership every week and taken somewhere else. Couldn't we have a system where we actually demonstrated how each community put their waste, sorry Ben if you're overwhelmed, you need a bigger trike, But with that idea, those kind of low level sort of micro behaviors, and even smart meters as an example. You know, we've learned through the fuel crisis following the invasion of Ukraine. Everyone looked much more closely at their fuel usage. Could we find a way to link reduced usage without penalising those who live in, you know, really hard to heat or hard to keep warm properties? Those kind of ideas, practical, low level, micro actions.
Can I go back on just on the waste thing in particular? We have actually been working with, or I've been working with Ben and Peter and Loop to get, there is a funding bid at the moment for community composter, one of their amazing, I can't remember what they're called now. But anyway, they're great tumbler compost. Potentially, first one would be at Broadway Community Gardens to see if we can see how we could potentially make community composting work. Basically, sort of what it would look like if there was local composters all over Frome. Obviously, I would then like them to be linked with community gardens as well, because then there's somewhere for the compost to go. So yeah, so that is already sort of being actioned at the moment. You're not going to be surprised with what I'm going to say, but I think in terms of food waste, I think one of the best things is encouraging more people to grow their own food, because I think when you realise how much energy it takes to grow food, you stop wasting as much of it, or at least that's, you know, my experience.
Thank you.
Sorry, this lady's been waiting a while.
Oh, sorry.
We have some amazing groups of people in this room who are all on board with everything that you guys are saying. We're all incredibly busy people just trying to deliver what we're doing each day. One of the things I found really useful about the reducing your plastic thing was actually, now I've got that poster on my wall, it's a direct action that I can take. So it's a very clear instruction to me. And it would be really good if I had somebody regularly emailing me and saying, oh, what have you been doing in the last 3 months, or something like that. And I think that actually all these people who are really behind everything we're talking about could be behind some more direct actions if someone could come up with that list. So there is very clearly some areas which really need addressing, the areas that we're going to make more of an impact overall. So, but we haven't got the time to be thinking about this because we're just so busy doing what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So could you give us some direct actions? Could you almost treat us like a sales force? You know, sort of put us up against each other. How many of those direct actions can we achieve within our individual organisations, and how many people from the general public can we also get to achieve direct actions? We're here for you all of us. So, but we need it to be easy. We need it to be simple. We don't need to be doing the research to understand.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a really, really good question and idea. A while ago, we did something called Good Business Visits as a town council, where we'd go and visit a business who wanted to talk to us about what they did, not just in terms of their environmental sustainability, but how they treated their staff, you know, kind of contributed to the local community. And we haven't done that in a while. And I do think it's one of the things that has a load of potential, because it is providing that sort of toolkit, and it's people opting in. So it's not kind of saying, Frome Town Council says everyone must do this. It's saying, you know, if you want to find out how to do these things, then we can, you know, come for a visit and do a toolkit. And, you know, if you wanted to subscribe to a mailing list, etc. So I think there's a seed of something really good there. And I would love to see that develop. And I think maybe it's something that we would need to do in partnership more widely than just as a town council.
Thank you.
Well, it's something about just an observation really about having a visual presence in the town, and it's been an amazing presentation, but for me, there's so many things going on that I don't think actually are visibly present. One of the things I think, I mean, art obviously is a way of kind of showing people what's going on in the town, sort of installations and art and the whole, there's a massive art community in Frome. But the other thing is what's happening to all the disused buildings in the town centre? Like, wouldn't it be an amazing thing for all the banks that have been closed to be taken over by green businesses or community action groups that are doing some of the things that you're describing? It's almost like a flagship. There are flagship buildings, and it would almost, metaphorically, symbolically be a way of turning things on their heads as they are sort of ex-bank buildings. It's just an idea. Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic idea, and I really wish that we could do that, but it's there's been lots of conversations going on about it, and it's difficult because it's you know, it's market, it's really high rents and prices to buy, and it's really difficult, but I think it's a fantastic idea, and I wish that we could, but we'll keep trying.
Okay, well, our mayor wants to say something.
Our mayor.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I've just got two short points to make. What we're talking about tonight is really a culture shift. I think Fiona mentioned about, what might we miss, or what might penalise us if we work towards this target. That culture shift has to come from everybody. It can't come from just a small number of people. And Amanda, you have my help. As a man, I tell people, this doesn't have any money, it doesn't have any magic, but it has a bit of influence, but in a way that I can help, I'll talk to you later. I think that culture shift is here in this room, but we need the culture shift across the town. We need it in schools, we need it in other groups, we need it in businesses, we need it in industry, we need it everywhere. And that culture shift will take time. It can't happen overnight. We know that. But if we can act as the catalysts, if we can act as the conduits, if we can act as the comms, as people were saying, then we have a chance, and I think then we can get some success. That's my first point. The second point is buses. I spent a lot of time in bus shelters over the last year, and mapping out bus routes and so on, and doing some wonderful work with this wonderful gentleman next to me, Peter Travis, who's co-chair of Somerset Bus Partnership in Fagdog. So what's your name? Stand. September is Catch a Bus Month. And Peter and I have been working almost a year now on buses in Frome, getting buses, routes like D2 to actually continue, the mail service to continue. We've now got the D2X, and we're promoting, particularly Peter, promoting the bus use. What we were in a Zoom meeting today talking about with the Wiltshire and Somerset Bus Partnership is still, we're working very hard to bring an electric bus to Frome. And I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but we may have some news for September to coincide with the Catch a Bus month of September. So I encourage you all to take buses. That is a great step to save carbon and to leave your cars at home, and to encourage lots of people to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions over here? Gentleman in the front here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and then this gentleman here.
The gentleman in the hat. Oh.
Yeah.
Gentlemen.
Sorry, sorry. Gentleman, yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. A couple of years ago, Wales set up an initiative called Wellbeing for Future Generations. Some of you might be aware of it. It was essentially a consultation exercise that took place at large scale, where quite a significant percentage of the population was involved in collective discussions and debates. And some of the key questions that were asked were about what is the vision for Wales? What is the desirable future for yourself, for your children, for your grandchildren? And several areas were included. Obviously, everything was, everything related to Wales was included. The climate was a huge part of it, or is a huge part of it. To what extent would a similar exercise be possible from an economic, financial, and practical point of view in Frome, with the aim of having this collective vision that could then become the reference point for current and future policy decisions across different, I guess, mandates, and as a reference point as well for discussions with Somerset Council. Is it something that would be doable here at such a, well, you know, with the size that we have here?
I can answer that. Frome currently has a neighbourhood plan, which I think incorporates a lot of what you've just said. That was done some years ago. There is, it probably needs updating, and that's something I think that you know, we can look at during the current term. I think the change from district to unitary has led to a lot of confusion as to what council's doing what, but I think that's now a lot clearer. So the path for us to update our neighbourhood plan is probably a bit easier now than it was a few months back. So that's something that we can certainly look at, and if we can, we'll look into updating that neighbourhood plan and incorporating all of what you just mentioned.
There was also a vision for Frome, which was done 2012. It was done quite early in its time, I think. Someone's going to correct me on that, which was sort of thing. But it sounds like I think what you're getting at is sort of creating the mandate, I guess, and understanding sort of what is the vision for this town. It sounds like to me what you're saying, what I'm hearing is a citizens' assembly on climate change or on what we're talking about. And great idea. I mean, yeah, I'd love to see that happen, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Thank you. Gentleman with the...
It's been a really interesting discussion, really, but I just feel something that's there's the elephant in the room which lurks in the corner, and I tell you that I've just been reading a book by Dale Vince called The Manifesto, which some people may not have read, but it's very interesting. And it was basically about how he converted Forest Green Rovers from meat-eating supporters to vegan supporters. Now he gets roughly about 6,000 supporters every fortnight at the football ground. And I think it's just one of those issues which we talk about climate change, we talk about carbon dioxide, but we never really talk about agriculture and how damaging it is to the climate itself in terms of producing methane, and therefore I just feel it's one of those issues which I think we kind of skirt around because we're a bit nervous, because we don't want to offend our meat-eating environmentalist friends. But I do think it's an issue which I think the town council should note as a way of life, because I think it's good for your health, and it's more importantly very good for the animals as they don't get slaughtered in a dreadful way.
I'm personally really interested in food, in case that hasn't sort of come across tonight, and in the sort of the changes that we need to our food systems and what we eat and how we eat and how much we waste, etc. I think it's quite a tricky, difficult subject, and there's lots of different viewpoints in it. I was at a talk recently by Chris Mage, who lives at Ballas Farm. He's written a book about small farm future, which sort of comes at it from another angle. So I think it is definitely a conversation to be had. I think I personally feel slightly uncomfortable. I think, you know, we try and enable people to make greener choices and to support them to do so, but sort of going as far as sort of telling people what to do, to me feels a little bit uncomfortable for a town council. But I think it's a conversation to be had, and it's a very tricky area, I think.
Hang on, just get a microphone, please. Hold on a minute. Just so everyone can hear you.
Oh,
thanks.
Sorry. I'll just outside of Frome, there's sustainable groups that are beginning to pop up that are talking with farmers, and farmers are very willingly joining those groups to have the conversation about shifting from large agriculture to smaller more higher quality. So the conversation has started already, and it's actually a very good point that Frome maybe as a council should get involved.
Yeah, so I didn't mean that, yeah, I completely agree the conversation's already gone. I meant just in terms of Frome Town Council, but it's, yeah, sort of getting involved. No, I agree. I think there's lots of really interesting work going on.
I'm just saying it's just beginning, but the farmers seem to be very interested in actually.
Brilliant.
Great. Thanks very much. It is just gone 8:30 and we are running late. Oh, well, I'm going to take just a couple more questions then. Got one at the back there and this gentleman here, and then we'll go to the next phase. Or back first.
This is probably a question for you, Steve, really. I'm quite interested in food production and how we can create more of our own food. And as we already mentioned, you know, we should all be trying to grow more of our own food. And one of that things requires is space. Certainly if you want to produce any significant quantity of food for yourself. And one of the things that I always find quite frustrating when we see new developments, new housing, is the gardens are abysmally small, which doesn't give you huge scope. Now, yes, you can give over space to growing, and I've got a very small garden myself, and we are going up some chickens, and we do grow quite a few bits and pieces, but we also have a toddler, and I want him to have some space outside to play things. So, well, I guess my question is there anything we can do as a council to try and change the way developments are done in Frome? If we're going to have a new development, do we have any ability to say you need to put more space aside for garden space, in terms of seeing it as a space for people to grow food?
At a recent planning committee meeting, I did try and ask a developer to put a raised bed in every single garden, and I did get shot down quite quickly on that. So yeah, I don't know if Steve's got anything more sensible to say on it.
All I would add is I think pre-COVID, developers were very keen to tell everybody that no one wanted a garden, gardens were a thing of the past. And I think when COVID happened, the benefit of green spaces, be it an open green space or a garden to get outside, became very important. And everybody realised that people did want gardens. And I think that's something that certainly as a town council, although we have no, we don't decide on developments, all we can do is comment and push for what we think is right. Yes, we do push for gardens, we push for green spaces. We don't necessarily, you know, this 10% increase in biodiversity that's contained in the planning regulations. We always push for a lot more than that. We fully understand the need for open green spaces, as Fiona said, and that includes space to grow your own food as well. It's become incredibly popular. So all I would say as a town council, we do try our hardest to push for as much as we can on that side. Yeah, please get in contact with us. We'd love to hear more. Thank you. Gentleman over here.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking for help, really. Help reference to consumption. So if I look at the large supermarkets, I'd love to go and do an audit of each and every one of them with asking 3 things reference to: can it be recycled? Where did it come from, each product? And where was it packed? Now, I'd be happy to give my time up to go in, but I'm not quite sure whether I'll get thrown out or not. Because if I can't find, you know, I think trying to understand the product mix and trying to understand actually what we have in our town, the large scale, you know, Sainsbury's, Asda and the others. I'm not sure it's illegal to do that, but I was just looking for advice whether that, because if you look down the sweet aisle, if you look at, you cannot get anything which isn't in a non-recyclable cheese. I mean, it's toothpaste. If I try and look at an average basket item, it is absolute carnage out there. So I'd like to try and go out there and actually go down each and every aisle, thousands and hundreds of thousands of items. Then we get some targets for the big supermarkets in our town, and we maybe help through our behaviours drive them to change.
Yeah. I'd like to just respond to the food aspect of that. I think Hugh, sitting at the back there, has done some really interesting research around comparing supermarket food prices with local producers as well. So maybe you could ask Hugh about his research that he's done so far and opportunities for other research specifically around food. Is that right, Hugh? Yes.
Great. Excellent. Right, I think it's now time to go on to the final part of the evening. As you can see, there's various stalls all around the sides. Please go and have a chat with the people, talk amongst yourselves. We'd love to see more post-it notes on the backboard as well. And yeah, we'll go as long as, what time we due to finish?
So we'd said 9 o'clock.
We said 9 o'clock.
So yeah, please make the most of the time. We'll also be around to continue conversations one-on-one.
Yeah. Oh, hold on 1 minute.
I just wanted to say, like, this is an emergency. Like, make no mistake about it. This is an emergency, and we need to also slow down. Okay, so you really, well, I love this line: let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Okay, so we really love what we're doing because we do not want to burn out. Every single one of you is so special for being here tonight. Okay, every one of you is so special. Just look at your neighbors. They could have been doing a million other things. Go on, look at your neighbors. Say thank you to your neighbor. Okay, thank you very much.